What does it take to be an artist? Sit down. This is going to take a while. What does it take to be an artist? It takes a lot of things to be an artist. For a bit of context, my name is Gus Brooks-Simpson, or if you really want my full government, Gus Augustus Brooks-Simpson. But just Gus Brooks-Simpson, or abbreviated where you're more likely to find me, Gus B. Simpson. Right? I'm a London artist, and I've been doing this for the last 12 years, man. At this point, I think it's been a while. I've been going at my craft for a while. What does it take to be an artist? Depending on who you ask, you may get different answers. Do you know what I mean? And what it takes, some people say, well, it doesn't take much. It just takes you being committed to your craft. Some people say it doesn't even take commitment to your craft. It just takes an interest in your craft. Some people will say it doesn't even take an interest in your craft. It's just as long as you're dabbling in it, you're an artist. Some people may even go further and say you're an artist, even if you're not even doing anything particularly creative, in the conventional sense as we understand it. A very interesting book that I do recommend everyone to read, especially if you're an artist, is Rick Rubin's A Creative Way of Being. I believe I got the name right. And in that book, he goes into sort of a lot of our sort of preconceived notions of what constitutes an artist, and how a lot of us actually are artists, even if we don't necessarily acknowledge it or appreciate the things that we do that make us artists. One example that came to mind is he said, if you take a normal route to work, the way you normally go to work, and you decided to deviate one day and decided to go a different route to work, you're an artist. You know, you've exercised your creativity and deviated from something that you would normally do. He says, in that case, you're an artist. So a lot of people have different, different interpretations, and give you different qualifications to what constitutes an artist. Since this is my podcast, my talk, my channel, I can tell you what I think constitutes an artist. And for me, it is individuals who essentially go against the grain. I don't think that is what makes an artist strictly. So I take that back, but I think that is probably, for me, the most potent aspect of artists, is the ability to deviate from the root. So that's actually a perfect example of the example that I used. If you can see this and you think, no, I'm gonna go that way, that is an important quality to have as an artist. Concretely, what makes one an artist, I couldn't say. I think it's something you need to say within yourself. Labels aren't very useful to me personally, not just as an artist, but as a human. I think labels are they they don't do much for art. A lot of time people ask me, what type of art do you make? When you're talking, you say, oh, I'm an artist, like I paint. And normally when I say I'm an artist, they take a look at me. The first thing they think is, oh, you make music. And I'm like, nah, I don't make music. I mean, I used to actually back in the day. I used to do a bit of rapping and whatnot. Yeah, no, that's a different conversation. But I say, no, actually, like I paint, I illustrate. And they go, oh, what type of art do you make then? What type of, and then it's difficult for me to kind of say. And not because I don't understand the work I make, but because I'm very conscientious of labels and boxes. And I have maybe an overt unwillingness to put myself in these categories, because they do not serve much for me as opposed to the person and your potential buyers to get a better understanding of who and what you are. But I think all great things transcend those things like boxes and labels. I think truly great things, those labels, these ways of identifying and quantifying things aren't useful. How do you quantify art? How do you qualify art? What makes art? What qualifies something to be called art? You know, there's a lot of artists in the world that they have a like a Picasso, for example. A lot of people would sort of, he's not as popular in the art world amongst artists as he is probably amongst people that don't practice art. From my experience, that's the observation I've made. A lot of artists that I know, you mentioned Picasso, they're sort of a bit indifferent. Obviously everyone knows Picasso, but they don't hold him in the same reverence that people that don't practice art do. That's what I've noticed. And it took me a while to actually to get into some of Picasso's work. But when I actually started looking into it, regardless of how you feel about him as a person, which is probably a great other subject that could be explored in a future episode, it definitely will be like can you separate the art from the artist? That's something I definitely would like to get into another time, and maybe even have a few of some other artists that I know and that I hold in a high regard to explore that conversation with. But that's for like a different day. The For now, the subject on when speaking about Picasso is, for me, what I really was interested in with Picasso, or that I noticed, was obviously his deviation from the more the more structured forms and figures in his work, right? Like he already demonstrated an ability to do so, to create realistic, semi-realistic portraitures and bodies of work, and then choosing to deviate from that. That is what I think is important for an artist, is that willingness to do so. Because I don't think there's any artist that truly appreciates the labels that are placed upon them. I personally don't. I don't feel they're of much use to me. Like I said, other artists, please leave your comments. Please engage with the channel, and that's what I want this to be. I want this to be somewhere where artists can engage in ideas, exchange ideas, explore ideas, and I guess even showing appreciation for each other. Because I do think art is definitely one of those parts of society that is so integral to civilization, yet a lot of it is, swept under the rug or just dismissed entirely. The importance of it isn't appreciated enough. Of course, I'm gonna feel that way because I'm an artist, right? Of course, I'm gonna feel that way because I'm an artist. But it's not just because I'm an artist, it's also because I understand, or I can appreciate the value in which art has given to me, not my art, but other people's art, right? I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't come across a Dragon Ball Z manga. I wouldn't be where I would be if I wasn't reading Marvel comics, growing up. I wouldn't be where I am watching anime or watching Cartoon Network and watching all these different ways in which the human body is portrayed, in the way colors are used, the way stories are told. Very important. And even obviously even the things that may not even necessarily be related to art, everything is everything becomes one thing, which is the artist. All those experiences we've had, the good and the bad, all of our form of education or lack thereof, I have no real formal education in the arts myself personally. And there's others that have much qualifications and credentials in those fields. And these are what makes us. Not necessarily it doesn't make them, as in they wouldn't be an artist if they didn't have those things. But being educated in an institution that holds art in a high regard, that actually acknowledges it, is very much important aspect of an artist. So, what makes an artist? We're going around in circles, which I apologize. That's probably something you will also see in this channel. I'm not. I'm an artist, so it's like I can keep exploring the same subject over and over and over and over and over again. Obviously, that's not great for viewability, but hey, man, I'm gonna try my best to get used to this as well and try and be way more concise. I think being an artist, you have to almost I say almost you almost have to be a bit of a art has to mean a lot for you to be an artist. That's one thing. Another thing, so we established to be an artist, you need an ability to deviate from the norm. That's what I said, right? An ability to think outside the box, to deviate from the norm, and a willingness to do so, I think is very integral to being an artist. The next thing, which I just mentioned, was you need to be able to hold art in a high regard. You know what? Yeah. I'm gonna do myself a favor. I'm gonna do notes while I'm doing this. And this is also something, this is my first time. Be patient with me. But this is something I'm gonna master for your sake as well as mine. So, in fact, you know what? Let me get my pen. This is also, I didn't really have a plan of how I'm gonna do this. I just know I decided I'm gonna do this, and that's it. And then everything else I got to figure out along the way. So, thank you for your patience. While I go off camera for a second, just to get my pen. This is a real podcast, man. Real DIY. Real DIY. Right, cool. So I'm gonna make some notes while I'm doing this. Yeah, what it takes to be an artist. What it takes to be an artist. Okay. Why is it doing that? So it takes a willingness to place art in high precedence over a lot of things, and also uh, holding art in high regard. No, holding art in a high regard, letting it take precedence over a lot of other things in life, and a willingness to deviate from norms. Right. Willingness to deviate from norms. This is real DIY. See, I'm an artist. I'm before anything else, I'm an artist. So even this, I'm just. But maybe I should be a bit more organized. But hey, man, this is the episode 1. Welcome, welcome. A willingness to deviate from norms, and ability, or and holding art in high regard. To what degree would definitely be obviously to each their own, but I think those are two integral things. Now, in when I say holding art in a high regard, so we explore the willingness to deviate from norms. Holding art in a high regard. To what degree is probably now the question, right? I think, especially in the 21st century where we are right now, I saw a little clip from a film that Timothy Chalamet's in. I forget the film. I think it's about a cricket player. Cricket player? Sorry, got tennis. I don't remember what it's called. It came out kind of recently, but I think it was tying into the same sort of idea, the same sort of concept as the film Whiplash, which is a film I'm familiar with, which is a really good film. You should watch it. This idea of ambition, right? But I'll take it a step back before that. Just art itself. To what degree do you hold art important to? Because one thing that is, like I said, it's a romanticization of being passionate about something, being obsessed about something. And in that clip, he said, "Well, it's not. It's there's nothing nice about it, really, because it's like I have to see something very specific through, and that's not fun. Like everything else in my life has to suffer because of that." Now, one could say, "Oh, well, you don't have to. It's all about balance, and that's another thing that people talk about in this day and age, balance. But you have to think about it. For you to truly be passionate about something is almost requiring more energy. These things all require energy. This takes energy. And so there is only a limited amount of energy that we have. Like the source is unlimited, but the output and the amount that is applicable day to day, we only have a certain amount. Like there's only a certain amount of hours in a day, right? And between going to the toilet and eating food and these type of things, looking after yourself and having a shower, going toilet, if I didn't mention that already, right? You only have a certain amount of time to give to the things that matter to you. So what matters to you? Now, some people have families, they have children to look after. So obviously that's probably going to take like first place, right? But then goes into the question, those that don't, what is it that they put as the totem of their ambition, of their life? For artists, I think it comes first. Like you speak to an artist, you speak to someone that cares about their work. They speak about it like it's their child. And if you was to take that away from them, I'm a real quickly just try and find this quote, right? That is very beautiful. And I think it pays, it will do a good deal in this discussion that we're having with myself. In the meantime, while I find that, I will go on some more about this idea of placing art in high regard. It is something that for a lot of people may be considered unyielding. It's not something that is immediately yielding. It's not something that is going to give you the same I don't know how to say it. Like if you walk through society and you've been acknowledged as a very good doctor, there isn't much people that will frown upon that or turn their nose up at that, right? Even though they may have reasons to. I don't know how much confidence you have in the medicinal institutions. That's a completely different subject, but right. Most people will say, "All right, yeah, that's a worthwhile endeavor to educate yourself in these matters." When it comes to the arts, because of what we're dealing with is so intangible, that can also be reflected in the people's sentiment towards such endeavors. Meaning, some people say, "What's the use of that?" Like, some people can go to a museum and a gallery and look at all this beautiful work, and they just don't really feel anything. They might say, "Oh, that looks nice," and maybe that's about it. And truthfully, that's like of no poor reflection on them. I mean, it is a reflection on them, but you learn to not hold it against people that they don't have the same values that you have. That's something that's important as an artist. Again, that comes to the sort of the willingness to deviate, right? You have to almost like subconsciously know, all right, I can't value things the way other people value them. If I'm willing to deviate from what people find important or what people find acceptable, and I'm willing to go in this direction, that almost inadvertently means that I have to have almost an indifference to what other people find tolerable, or what other people find beautiful, what other people find acceptable. Just being an artist. So we'll add that as number 3. I mean, that still is like a willingness to deviate, but it's like you're a contrarian. You're more willing to be an individual, which I think is very important for being an artist. See, I'm coming up with a lot of answers here. So back again. What does it take to be an artist? We've got a willingness to deviate from norms. We have holding art in high regard. Now we have an ability to be an individual. Right? So that's 3 things we have. A willingness to deviate from the norms, which could almost be conflated with an ability to be an individual. But not necessarily. But yeah, if you're gonna look at it, dissect it a bit. Definitely 2 different things. A willingness to deviate from the norm, but the norm, you still may find outside of that norm, you still may find pockets of individuals who are in groups and collectives that you can associate with. But I think being an artist, your individuality is also something that's also very integral to you. I think it's just integral to being a human being, right? So look where I'm going with this. Maybe being an artist is just something that humans naturally are. Maybe that's just a thought piece. Who knows whether that's the truth or not? And obviously, holding art in a high regard, like you have to find art important. I think, you have to. I think that is what would make an artist. I don't think there's an artist that doesn't think art is important. Maybe there is, but I think that's something that all artists would have in common. This ability to be an individual. I take that back. It wouldn't even be an ability because we all have the ability to be an individual. It's again the willingness to be an individual, the acceptance of yourself. Because I suppose that's another level, another thing that's what makes an artist. Honesty, but I guess an ability to be an individual, right? So I won't add that because I'll start making a mad list. I guess I'll sub bracket that and I'll say honesty, transparency, probably the better word, right? You have a vulnerability. You see, like we're getting somewhere. Those things are important to be an artist because regardless of whether you're putting your work out there or not, being vulnerable even with yourself is is something that some people are incapable of doing. Some people can't tap into their thoughts and their feelings because they've been so far ostracized from themselves due to whatever reason, you know. And we all have many reasons to shut off ourselves from ourselves, as well as shut ourselves off from the world. We have all these reasons to do so, but an artist, I think, prides themselves in their vulnerability, in their willingness to be transparent, and in the willingness to be honest and frank, even if that is comes out in a way in which there's a lot of colors and a lot of abstract concepts and ideas, and even though it's not flagrant and it's not in your face as to what they're telling you, again, if you spend a lot of time interacting with art, engaging with art, because I don't think you could just, it's not just looking, it's not about just looking at art. Art really is, it's like a conversation when you're, especially when you're dealing like paintings, portraits, and bodies of work that have been put on a canvas, you know, as well as music. You're engaging with something. It's not just a one-way communication. I mean, one-way communication. That's even, you see, that's a what's the word? That's a fallacy. Communication can't be one way. It's communication. So there's two things, right? You understand? So that willingness to be open and to open to communication, maybe that's something that makes an artist, a willingness to communicate, an openness of communication. But I guess maybe that just comes to back to an ability to be an individual, maybe. Nah, it's different. All right, so let's add that. Let's add that willingness or openness to communication. Which I think that's really important. That communication, that willingness to communicate, that openness, because I feel like all great art impresses upon me in a way in which is very difficult to explain. You know, there is a conversation that is being had with the art, with yourself. I don't know how long I want this video to go for. I really think like 15 to 20 minutes is a good mark for now, especially since I'm by myself and I'm just talking to the camera. But you know, and maybe I definitely need to formulate things a bit better. But I definitely did want to find that quote. So just bear with me for 1 second. I love quotes. I love quotes. Um, and this was in pertaining to the significance of art. The quote goes, and this quote is from Zora Neale Hurston's 1937 novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. So that's the name of the novel. And the quote is, half gods are worshipped in wine and flowers. Real gods require blood. What does it mean to be an artist? I definitely will say it does have to take a precedence to your life, or in your life, a high precedence, to the point where almost every other aspect of your life is going to be affected by your ambition and your passion regarding the arts. Just like in anything else. If you wanted to be a computer scientist, if you wanted to be a doctor, right? Your spouse would say, well, I guess I understand that, you know, I can't spend as much time with you as I wanted because obviously you got to study to be a doctor, you know, or you studied to be a lawyer, or you got to study to be a computer scientist, or, you know, or an athlete. Even that we can acknowledge and say, okay, if you want to be the best basketball player, or you want to make the NBA, you want to make the Premier League football, you want to make the NFL, you want to be at Wimbledon, right? There's necessary sacrifices that will have to be made for you to do so. And people will be able to acknowledge and recognize those sacrifices. But when it comes to art, I feel like those sacrifices can be trivialized. Because when it comes to the arts, out of all those things I mentioned, the arts does not yield the same social recognition that those other things get. I personally think it's because of, I couldn't tell you where we're at. Because of where we're at, I think it's probably something that would always be the case. Why? I think because you're dealing in a language that isn't, it can't be quantified or qualified the same way. You could look at NFL players and say, okay, these are the good ones and these are the not so good ones, maybe due to their performance and their ratings and their metrics, how fast they are, how strong they are. Do you know what I mean? The average ratings on their performances. With doctors, how much do they know? Where did they study? These type of things. When it comes to the art world, a lot of those rules and a lot of those standards are flipped on their head, and then it's a lot more difficult to navigate the art world in terms of what is good and what isn't good, or what is good and what is great, as opposed to those things I mentioned. And maybe it's because it's so heavily subjective. It's dealing in a language in which it's a completely different language. It's dealing in a world that isn't concrete. And so our concrete ideas and our concrete understanding of things don't serve us so well when it comes to the art world. What does it mean to be an artist? It's dealing in the abstract, dealing with the untangible and making it tangible in some form or way. That's what it means to be an artist. And that's not conclusive. This is something I definitely want to get more into, but this is something that I've been meaning to do for a very long time. And so I just have to start doing it, regardless of who else is here and who's not here, regardless of what should be ready and what isn't ready in this place. Right? But if you're watching this, please drop a like, share it with an artist that you think might benefit from this video, and even subscribe if you feel so inclined. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. You take care of yourself until then.